HoloCure is a game in which you can combine a sausage with a dragon's tail to create a lightning wiener. In this project I'm going to show how to use the different softwares I know to create a helper tool to let you know what collaboration weapons you've unlocked, which you still are missing, and which weapons you need to get the unlocks. The project will start off with everyone's favorite Excel, and I have access to Excel 2016 and not 365, which means there are functions like filter and unique that I don't have access to. And they would help a lot because they are array functions, and they mean that I can put in a function in one cell and it will spill down to multiple rows. To begin with, I need to go to the web page that has the list of all the collab weapons, where I can simply copy paste it. And copy that, and I will put that into my tab here from webpage. Because what you'll see is that it copied in the images, and it also didn't give me a format that I want. So I'll be removing these images, which I do by holding down Control, so I can multi-click, but I'll do that off screen. I've deleted the images and I've added these headers just to make it more clear. And what's happened is when I copy pasted in the text, the description field does this wrap text and merge and center, and then you can see that attack type is on its own row and weapon 1 and 2 are on its own row, and sometimes there'll be a blank row, and then we have collab on the next row. But here for the next item, I don't have that empty row between weapons and collabs, which presents actually not some issues in this case, but it could have. And what I need to do is to fill up, so absolute wall needs to be put up in the earlier rows, and then I can do the same for the weapons and fill up, and then I will have this row with my all my information. But I can't just select the collabs here and then say fill up, because then it will override. So it says broken dreams, which was the value in row 19, that gets copied up. But what I can do instead is to go all the way down to the bottom to select all of my rows. And then I can say I want to find and select, and I want to only highlight those that are empty. And here I've just only selected the empty cells, and I need to pay attention to what cell I'm in right now. So right now it's highlighted B3. And what I can then say is I want to grab the value from B4. And what I actually want is I want to say if my cell is empty, which is all the cells I've selected, then grab the value from the row below. And when I then hold down Control and press Enter, I will copy this function into all of my selected cells. And because this is B4 and it doesn't have the dollar symbols, it's a relative reference, which means it gets copied. So now I get absolute wall, absolute wall, absolute wall, absolute wall. And for some reason it adds links here, which I don't know. Or I think it's a link at least. It looks like it's a link. So I can just select everything and say I want to remove links. Actually, I don't think there are links. No, it's just formatting. So I can just say I want to copy the formatting. And now I have all of my collab weapons, but I have duplicates, which I don't want to. So I need to get rid of my duplicates and only get the first row. Well, actually, I guess that doesn't really matter because the information is the same in all of my rows here. Absolute wall, and the same for the book and weapon and attack type. It's just the description that's annoying. And what I can do is just to turn this into a table and say okay, and now I get rid of that merge and center because I'm inside a table. And it fully understands that these cells are actually empty because the value is only in a single cell. And actually I kind of screwed up. I should have had kept this on a separate sheet. So I can copy this over and say this is all my collabs and say okay. And then I want to delete my empty rows, the ones that are empty in column E. And I can say that by just saying that if there is text within this row, this will return just a length. And actually I need to have my condition outside. So right now I'm saying I want to check if the length of cell E3 is greater than 0. So I don't want to have a table reference, which you normally do. But in this case, I want my function to be copied down, which it doesn't seem to want. So I'll just do that manually. And then I'll get true and false. And I want to get rid of all of my false, which means I can again just say I want to copy all the values and then right click. Actually, I need to first select those that are equal to false. And then I want to say, what do I want to find? I want to find those that are false. And then I want to find all. I need to not be in replace, but in the find mode. And I'm not looking in formulas, I'm looking in the values, because the formula isn't false, the value is false. So I can say find all, and then I could just click, but I want to select all of them, which I can just do by holding Control A. So now I've selected all the cells, and then I can right click and say I want to delete entire rows, and that gets rid of those. So now I just have all of the rows, and of course I made a mistake here, which was before I do any deletion, because these are actually they're actually a formula. I need to first say Control, insert as values, and now I can do that. So again, I've already said find all of those cells where the value is false. Click down here, Control A. Then I can right click and say delete entire row. So now I have 23 collabs. And if you went into the website and checked, you'd see that it should be 23. And I no longer need that column, which means now I have a table with all of the weapons and all of the collabs. I need also another table where I can write in which collabs have I already unlocked. And the point here is that you're supposed to manually go into the unlock collabs table and type in if you've added any. And on that note, I want to have changed the name of the tables so that I can find them with references. So this is called TBL unlock collabs. And this one would be called TBL all collabs. And this is just so when I reference them, if I say table 3, well, that doesn't tell me anything. But TBL all collabs, I know what that means. And then I want a list of all the unique, and technically you could put these on the same sheet, but I need them because I don't have access to the unique function. But if I did, I would go into, I think that's formulas instead. Yeah, under name manager, I would create a name here, which would be called unique collabs, where I use the unique function on all the collabs. And this is because I need to actually duplicate this table so that I can swap weapon 1 and weapon 2 around, so that I can search in one column for all of my options. That would make things easier. And I'm doing that in Power Query and in the SQL solution and in the Python solution. But I won't be doing that right now. Right now, all I need is to go into the all collabs, and I can simply say I want to copy these and put them in here as values, and then just say delete duplicates. I don't have any duplicates right now, but this is more sort of the showcase what you should do. And the same with unique weapons. And this is because there are some weapons that you can only find in the second column, which I think was X potato. Yeah. So most weapons can either create 2 or 3 collabs, and for X potato, you will only find that weapon in the second column. Oh, there's one in the first column also that only exists in weapon 1. Yeah, that would be BL book. This can't be found in weapon 2 column, but I want to have one column that I can search in to get all weapons. So all I'm going to do is to just copy the 2 columns and go into the unique weapons and paste them. And actually I want them as an extension, because now I'm going to have 46 values, but there aren't 46 weapons. It's just that the same weapon can give 2 or 3 collabs, so remove duplicates. And here I would use the unique function on the 2 columns if I had access to that. Now that I have my list of the unique collabs and of the unique weapons, I want to turn those into a named range to make it a bit easier to refer to them, which was where I was before with the name manager. So I can simply say this should be all collabs. And even though I have a table called all collabs, I don't have that prefix, the TBL. So this is fine, and the same for the weapons. I can say all weapons. And this is just so I don't have to write this, because this is going to get messy, and if I refer to this area, this range, multiple times, then I don't want to have to update it. So this is like creating a variable. Because the first thing I want to do is to do a lookup to say, hey, I have a collab and I want to know what weapons do I need to get it, and also what is the type and description. And this should be a drop down, and I can say that should be a list, and the source is then my named range, which I can get by pressing F3, which gives me a list of all my names. So that was all collabs, and okay. So this is a lot nicer to look at, because then I can say, hey, what is all collabs? Well, if I press F3, I can paste that like this, and I don't have access to array functions, but it would spill down. But if you select the name and press F9, you can see the array. So this would be all the values. But if you want to see, is it Control F3? Yeah. Control F3 is the same as going to formulas and pressing name manager. And then here I can see the name all collab. What does that refer to? Well, this range. And then when there are more weapons added, I would have to expand this. And then all of the places where I reference all collabs would get updated. So I could also write that in one cell and reference that, but again, if I had access to unique, I could do that, but I can't do that here. And then I just want to add the paint bucket, and we can say you can't search in 2016. I think they added that in Excel 365. And then just for illustration purposes, I'm going to show something in the cell here. I wouldn't do that normally, but it will make it easier to understand. So I can say I want to match, which means I want to find the index position of this value inside my array, and I should just be able to say all collabs because this is an array, and my match type is 0 because I want an exact match. So now you can see that Broken Dreams is the 5th item within my array, which we can validate by saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. And again, I would normally do this inside the function, but I will have to say I want to use this index position to go in and find the corresponding place. And that actually means that I messed up here, because I should not be referencing the named range, because what if the sort order is different between all collabs and then the sort order of the unique? Like, what if I wanted to sort this based on descending or ascending or something else? Because the people on the wiki were nice enough to sort this based on collab ascending, but what if they weren't? So I should actually not reference the named range, I should reference the TBL all collabs, the column of collabs. And again, in this case, it's going to give me the exact same value because they were nice enough to sort it. And I could also go in here and say it should be sorted, and all of these should be sorted, but I don't have access to the sort function either. I can go in and right click and sort, but I don't have the function called sort. That is fine. Then I just need to say, well, what do I want to find? I want to find the weapon 1, 2, tag type and description. So the corresponding information for row 5, which is simply then the index function. And I have my array, that is the TBL, all collabs, and I want the weapon 1 column. And what item do I want the index position? Well, that is the value from here, which I will just anchor because then I can copy the function. And that is fine. So that's CEO's tiers. And then it's smart enough when I copy the function, and this is sometimes annoying and sometimes nice. If you copy the function by dragging, it will understand that I want the next column inside of my table, which would then be weapon 2, attack type description. So because I have the headers here in the correct order, this works. But if you don't want this portion to be updated when you copy, then you need to do the normal Control-C and then insert like that, Control-C, Control-V. But I do want that to happen, where this the row I'm referenced the column I'm referencing is moving. So I would do it like this. And then that was actually everything. So I can just test it out and change this and everything updates. So this I would normally make invisible if you wanted to show it. And I think it would be better performance to have the calculation in a cell or in a named range, because I have 4 calculations that refer the same. So instead of saying D3, I could do this. That would produce the same result, but then I'm calculating the same information 4 times for each of these cells. That's not a huge problem in a data set this small, but it's something to keep in mind, that you don't want to do the same calculation many times. The next challenge is then to do the inverse, which is instead of looking up a collab, I look up a weapon. I'm intentionally choosing not to duplicate the table, which I do in my Power Query solution, which means I need to do a lookup in weapon 1 to find the weapon, and I need to do lookup in weapon 2, and then I can use conditional formatting to make things invisible. So this isn't a super sophisticated solution, but that's the point, that you can also do things in a simpler way, I guess. And just as before, I'm just going to copy that, because then I just have to update the validation. That is no longer all collabs, that is now all weapons. I want to do a lookup in weapon 1, and then I want to find the index position as I did up here. And then I want to see if I can actually find the weapon or not, because then I can do conditional formatting to hide these. And just as before, I can do the match, where I want to look up this value, which should be anchored, because I want to copy that into the other rows. And I want to find that within my TBL all collabs, and then that is weapon 1. And again, I need that to be an exact match. That was not an exact match. That is an exact match. So now I have position 3, and here it's not enough to do this, because I will need to look not in just the column 1, because that would always return the same value. I need to say I am not looking at the whole column of weapon 1. I want to look at the column weapon 1 after the previous row. So I can't just refer to the table columns, weapon 1 column. I need to refer to actually the sheet. So not like this, because that gives me this. I need to say I want to look into the sheet. I'm just going to change the age. So I need to go all the way down to the bottom and say this is what I want to look into. And then change the age to B and the age to B. Because this way I can say that in my next row, I want to not start at B3, I want to start at the row after B3. But this still gives me a 3. And then I need to take into account what if I can't find it, but I'll do that when we get to it, so you can see what happens. And this introduces my favorite function, Indirect, which is a bit dangerous to use, because it can result in slowdown when you do calculations, because it's a volatile function, which means it needs to be calculated every time you update a cell. So if you have a slow spreadsheet, it could be because of this function. So I still need to do a match based on this cell, but I'm no longer looking into TBL collab. I also needed to copy that down. And now it did what I don't want it to do, which was update my reference. So it's no longer saying B3, it's in B5. And like I said, I need the indirect function on the next cells, not on the first row, because it needs to find the first instance. But here I want to say indirect. And actually I'll just go to the next line so we can see more. So the indirect function takes a text and converts that into a cell reference, which is a bit trippy, I think. But what I need to know is that how do I write my reference? Well, it starts out with the name of the sheet with these apostrophes at the start, and then an exclamation point, and then the area. or rather the column and the cell. And because I need to convert a string into a cell reference, I need to have my quotation marks around this all collabs part. And then I can do like this, and I keep forgetting that I can't do shift enter to a new line, but like this. So the first portion is called apostrophe all collabs apostrophe exclamation point B. Then I need to know what is my starting cell. Well, that is equal to 1 plus the value I got from the previous row, because this tells me I'm in row 3. And then I need the string portion for the rest. And I'm going to say that I want to go not until B25, but I'll go until B40, because then I have more area at the bottom. So now I'm converting this into a range to do a lookup in. Yeah, so that is my lookup array, and my match type is that. But this isn't everything, because this gives me a 2, and that's not what I want, because that was called cutting board. So if I see cutting board is here in not row 3, but in row 5, but it's the third index of the column. So it's not actually true. And that is because I need to update something, which is here I'm saying B3 to B25, which was my column, but I don't want my column anymore. I want my sheet, because the first time I find cutting board is not the third index of the table, it is the 5th row of the sheet. That's what I want. So I can say I need to start after the 5th row. So I need to update this also to say that this should not be B3, it should be B1 until 40. And I'm just picking 40 because that means I have a space at the end. So I find cutting board in the 5th row, and I find cutting board in the 8th row, and then I can copy that down. And then this needs to also be moved down. Here, the reason why this gives a wrong value is because I forgot to add the value of the previous cell. If I go into the all collabs table, I know that my third position needs to be 13, because I can find cutting board here. And then I need it as 5 also. So just to make the troubleshooting a bit easier, I can change this to a weapon that I know I can only find in column 1, which would be the bounce ball. So if I go into all collabs and set a filter on bounce ball, I can see that I have that in row 3, 9 and 23. I need these values to be 3, 9 and 23, and then I can figure out how to get there. Because this is correct, it is in position 6, but I need to add onto this the value of the previous row, because that is how many rows I'm skipping. Because I'm saying here, I don't start in row 1, I start in row 1 plus the value in this one. So I can find it in position 3 and in position 9. And then I need 23, which is also just to say plus the previous row. And if I then change it back to cutting board, where I don't have a third collaboration in the first column, I need to simply handle that. And the lazy method is to just wrap it in if error, and that's honestly fine, because there are situations where I can't get the value in the first column because it only exists in the second column, and vice versa. I'll simply say if this produces an error, then I want it to be blank. So now that's just blank, and then I will just have to take that into account when I get to the next ones, which is why I'll be making this column before I fix the next rows where I want to check weapon 2 column also. So this is simply saying that if the value in this cell is equal to a number, so actually I need to say is number. So if the value in the column to the left is a number, then I'm just going to return 1, and if not, I return 2. And again, this is more for visualization purposes than me thinking this is good code. And this is just so that I'm not referencing a cell that produces the value nothing or blank, because this is now a text and I can't do a lookup based on a text, but I can do a lookup based on a number. So I can do then an if sentence saying that, hey, if this is a number, which I know if this value is a 2, if this value is a 1, then it just makes my work a lot easier. And I have to do the exact same thing for weapon2 column, but instead I need to look at, and now it's being annoying and changing the relative reference here with B6 and so on, which I could have fixed with the dollar signs. But this needs to be then column C and not column B, but otherwise it's the exact same logic. And I can find that in the weapon2 column, which is the first value, which is row 3, which is why this gives 3. So if I change to X potato, which only exists in column 2, then I get exactly what I expect. And Psycho X is the same, and Whammy Water. And the Asakoko exists in both columns. So this is perfectly fine, and now I basically need to do the exact same thing as before with just doing index, because this is then my row number. But again, I don't look into the table column, I look into the sheet column. And again, if I had access to the filter function, I could simply say I want to return those rows where the value in column B or in column C is equal to this value, which would then give me an array that would expand. So for instance, something like Whammy Water that only has 2 collabs, I would only return 2 rows, because these are now just in the way and ugly. But I don't have access to that. So now that I know whether there is a row, I know that based on this column, so I can just say if this row is equal to 1, then I want to do my lookup. And because I have the explicit row number, I don't need to use index, I can use indirect, because I know the column I want to look up and I know what the row number is. So this is literally saying, hey, go inside here and grab me that value. And because I need the row to be variable, I can't just say like this, go grab that value, but this 3 should be a variable instead. And just as before, I need quotation marks around the name, and then a single quotation mark and apostrophe, the name of the sheet. And it was always column B to find weapon 1, even though it's actually found here. So this is a duplicate column, but this is so I can do the same functions in both rows. So go into column B, and I want you to go into the row that I find here. And that can be anchored on the B column, so I can drag the function over. The logical test is not equal to 1, then just be empty. So that would be a glow stick, which matches because here I'm looking for all of the collabs for the glow stick, and that is my first weapon. So if I then copy that over, I forgot to anchor that it should be anchored on column C. And then I just need to change the B to now a C and a D and a E. Because collab is not in the D column, it's in the A column, because collab comes first, then weapon 1, then weapon 2. So attack type is then D, and description is then E. So now this is working, and if I'm lucky, I can copy that down, and I am lucky. So this is all fine, and then again, if I'm super lucky, I can copy this down, and it looks like I am super lucky. So we can just do some different ones, and this is all fine. And again, these are duplicates because I'm looking into weapon 2 column, but I can live with that. Now I want to get a table that takes all of my unlocked collaborations and then finds the related weapon and weapon 2 and type and description. And again, if I had access to array functions, I could simply say, hey, print the entire unique collabs. Just print this, and that would be fine and dandy. So I could do this, unlock collabs, print that, but it has no idea what I'm trying to do because this returns multiple values, and Excel 2016 doesn't know how to handle this, which is why the lazy solution is to simply say I want to grab the value of our unlock collabs, this, and then copy that down. But then this returns 1 if it's just blank, so I want to say that if the value is blank. So if is blank, this value, then I want to return nothing, and if it isn't blank, then return the value. And as before, because I'm doing multiple lookups, I'm doing 4 lookups on one value, I want to create the index in a helper column for ease of understanding what's going on, which is then to say I want to match my value here, which I can anchor on the A column. That's what I want to find. Where do I want to find it? I want to find it in the TBL all collab, the unlock collabs. No, I want to find it in all collabs because unlock collabs only has the name of the collab. And then I am finding it inside the collab because the all collabs table has all my information. And my match type is 0. But then my problem is that if I'm trying to do a lookup on an empty cell, well, that doesn't make any sense. So as before, I can say if NA, then I want to return nothing. And I want to see just how far this goes down, so now I mark the end of my functions. So now I can copy down. So that is fine, that's just blank. And I could use conditional formatting if I really wanted to. And actually I could do that here, but I don't even need conditional formatting. I can just make it invisible by changing the font color, because I've made sure to check that these functions only run if this is equal to 1. But otherwise it's just like a normal index match. I now have my array, which is the all collabs. And in this case I look into weapon 1, and my value is, well, the row number, which is actually the row number in the array, is here, and I want to anchor that on the B column so I can copy it over. And just as before, if I go down, it will give value, which I don't want. So I can just be lazy and say, if this produces an error, then give me nothing. Which is fine error handling because I have a small data set, but it's not exactly good. And then because I've anchored correctly, I can simply drag it over, and the column I'm referencing will be moved to the right, but I'm still referencing the B28 cell. So this is all fine, and then I can drag that down. That was how to get the unlock collabs without Excel 365.